All right. Test. Okay. Test. Okay. All right. Just trying to see. Can you guys hear me? Test. Hello? Let's see. Hello? Hope you guys can hear me. Hello? That might be a little too loud. All right. Okay. Just trying to make sure everything's good. Hello? Oh, what's the problem? Hello? Okay, I'm just testing this. Trying to make sure that here we go. All right. I'm just trying to make sure that okay, there it goes. There it goes. I want to make sure you can hear me. It didn't look like this was active. Okay. All right. So here's the next reading for Otto's Toy Factory. This one is Chapter 7, Innocence. All right. Yeah. Chapter 7. Yes. Chapter 7, Innocence. All right. Otto remained at the base of the building, arms outstretched, like when I first met him. I remained puzzled by his gesture until I observed his body language. With no other choice, I did what he asked. Climbing out the window, I tried my best to balance myself on the frame before jumping. Otto caught me and placed me on his back. He took me to the construction site. We played a little, but he could sense that I wasn't in the mood. So we mostly just spent our time watching the stars and eventually the sunrise. Excuse me. All right. It wasn't until the sun burned halfway through the spring twilight did I finally develop the courage to answer the question he asked earlier. Otto, someone broke into Barry's house. Did you do it? Otto looked at me and calmly but quietly shook his head no. What about Billy and the others? His ear perked back like he was completely unaware of their existence. After another second, he shook his head again. What about that janitor at my school? I saw you in the music room. You can't deny that. This time Otto nodded. Then he pulled out a worn-out leather-bound notebook from his denim pocket, along with a dirty ink bottle. He dipped the tip of his claw in the ink bottle and painstakingly proceeded to carefully write on the yellowed and crumpled up sheets of paper. The stuffed bear tediously ripped the page off the notebook and handed it to me. Careful not to smudge the fresh ink, I pinched the note up from Otto's dirty copper-coated claws. I didn't mean to hurt that man. I was looking for a gift for you when he startled me. I only tried to scare him, but he wouldn't go away. I looked at him. So you did hurt the janitor. Otto nodded shamefully. He took the paper and wrote back. He started to scream and I panicked. I didn't want to get in trouble. More humans would have came. They would bring guns. Only scratched him, but I didn't mean to. I didn't think that I would kill him. After reading this, the creature whimpered in remorse. You don't know your own strength, do you? Otto shook his head, ears drooping, looking to me with a puppy dog innocence through his vacant sockets for eyes. I remember being caught off guard of how surprisingly childlike his demeanor was, like he never really grew up. Having a mind stuck in a world of toys and playtime, It seemed like he didn't really know where the line between fantasy and reality, where the line was between fantasy and reality. I wanted to believe him. Still, I wasn't convinced. Then why did you steal Barry's trumpet, knowing it was his? Otto wrote something else in the notepad. Then he tore the page out and gave it to me. I didn't know the trumpet was his. I lowered the note and stared at him suspiciously. How could you not know that it was his? Barry's name tag was on it, I argued. Otto paused and scratched his head, staring at me the whole time like he was keeping a heavy, shameful secret. I felt that a new sense of guilt nestle itself into my heart when I asked it with an innocent, childish voice, "What's wrong, Otto?" Otto looked to the ground below, conveying the sad face the Tasmanian devil would make when caught doing something wrong. He sighed through his nose and wrote another note. Otto looked away dramatically as he held the note out to me. I read the note. I read what he wrote, and the guilt I felt before evolved into pure shame, and enveloped my heart. The note read, "I can't read very well." The guilt I felt lingered as I looked to him as he stared back at me with the same eyeless puppy dog face. But then how can you read my notes? Otto's ears perked up a bit. He wrote something again and handed it to me. Very carefully, and I have my kids help me. Sorry. I gasped, ecstatic. I yelled, "Otto, you have a family?" The beast gave a small, close smile and nodded. Can I meet them? Again, Otto wrote in his notepad and handed it to me. Not yet, but don't worry. You'll meet them soon enough. I'm waiting for a very special occasion. With that note, I had long forgotten my accusations, as they were replaced by my father's reality to move us out of Placerville County. I lowered the note and loosened my grip until it blew away in the wind. Otto, I hope that day is coming soon because my dad is planning for us to move. I don't know where, but I think it's going to be far away. I recited softly, a few tears shimmering in my eyes like small diamonds. I began to cry. Otto rested his giant paw on my shoulder and hugged me close. We hugged one another for another 5 minutes or so before Otto took me home. I entered my room and looked back to my furry friend, who handed me another note. Don't be sad, Luke. I'm not worried. I will find you no matter where you go. I promise I'll never lose you. I smiled to him. The beast mirrored my expression with a closed smile of his own before reaching out his paw, closing every clawed digit but his pinky. I immediately understood the gesture. Without hesitation, I put out my hand as Otto Pinky swore to never leave my side, no matter where I went. No one else disappeared after Barry and the others, but the case was still active. Otto showed no signs of guilt or awareness of the missing children, but the realist in me was still skeptical. So I wrote to Otto that I couldn't play with him as often because Dad was getting suspicious about my chronic insomnia. A partial lie, of course. We exchanged notes to each other seamlessly almost every day and night, but we didn't play at our favorite cement playhouse as often, thanks to my little white lie and the fact that the building inched ever closer to its grand opening. It was a new apartment complex, though its opening had to be pushed off an extra few weeks because of suspicious activities in the area, due to the damage Otto and I made while playing. Afterward, we started meeting in the woods every once in a while. Just before I was to graduate, the police finally caught a few suspects. Not at school or anywhere near it, but a few blocks away. 3 transient meth heads were found squatting in a hollowed-out abandoned household that everyone forgot about, all 3 of which had quite the record a few towns over, from carjacking to intrusion to assault and battery, and even attempted murder. The leading investigator drilled the suspects for hours and hours about the other kidnappings, but they weren't able to retrieve any information because they claimed to not understand what was happening. An obvious lie to the police. Despite no verbal confession, detectives were certain that it was the three who did it. Their evidence? Barry's book bag, along with a handful of toys that belonged to him, all partially torn and missing parts. Alongside this were also the backpacks and toys of all of his friends, ripped into shreds and covered in blood. The icing on the cake were the tattered remains of 5 high school Letterman jackets, all one of which still had Charlie Muskett's arm. The cherry on top, it was all found in the back seat of a very familiar vehicle. A red Corvette, the same car the missing high school students were last seen in a few months earlier. The car was found behind the abandoned house. Its front end was completely smashed in. The axles and wheels bent and popped. The sides bashed and the windows shattered. Amazingly, the vehicle was still able to run. It was assumed that the Corvette had to be the car that slammed into the Wilcox house after being taken on some kind of destructive joyride. The transients pleaded for their freedom, claiming they didn't know the vehicle was even there, let alone the toys and the Letterman's jackets found inside. On top of this, their fingerprints were all over the vehicle. However, they denied this too, claiming it was from examining the car the morning of their arrest, and they were already thinking of calling when the cops arrived, but decided against it because they were afraid. They even went as far as to claim they saw someone in their backyard the night before they got arrested. It was pretty obvious to the authorities who scoffed at them, blaming their destruction on their over the top drug use, blaming their delusion on their over the top drug use. Nobody in town believed them. It wasn't long before they were tried for several counts of murder, aggravated assault, intrusion and kidnapping, with each individual sentenced to serve 2 life terms in prison. They never found the bodies of the children, but it was assumed they were buried somewhere in the surrounding wilderness. They had to close the case, but continued to hope that one day cops could find the victims' bodies and return them home to their families, offering some justice and a form of closure, but not complete for the adults. I won't lie, I did feel something through all of this. I felt happy for the parents because they did get some form of closure, and I also felt bad for the kids that weren't able to live to be grown-ups. I'll even admit I felt sorry for Barry too. Despite all that the jerk did, he still didn't deserve what happened to him. But I guess that at the time, that karma wasn't really one to discriminate. Barry was still a bully after all, and he thrived on making a lot of kids miserable. So I guess all his cruelty finally caught up with him, in the worst way, of course. But there was still some good news to come out of it. Otto was innocent. I sighed in relief. I was so happy that Otto didn't do it after all. No, I'm just kidding. I sighed in relief. I was so happy that Otto didn't do it after all. I felt bad for accusing him and even apologized the first chance I got. Like the rest of the town, I assumed those druggies had to have something to do with what had to have been the ones responsible. The evidence was all there. How could these people just deny it? With the case finally closed, Dad and I were safe. Otto and I could play again. And if another psychomaniac were to tear through my life again, I knew that my best friend would protect me. From then on until the end of second grade, I focused all my energy on school, doing homework, passing tests with flying colors, and saying goodbye to all my old teachers. By then, everything had finally died down. Otto and I would play and talk about anything: school, cartoons, comic books, favorite animals, and whatever else came to mind. Well, whatever else came to my mind anyway. But Otto never argued. The jolly old bear would just sit and quietly listen, like what you'd expect from a regular stuffed animal. On occasion, he'd nod or shake his head at the subject. Some nights I had to stay at home and sleep, or Otto had to go spend time with his family, who I had yet to meet. On the rare occasion, he would write, "I have to go to work." Out of curiosity, I asked him where he worked one random night. Otto wrote that he owned a toy factory he built himself a long time ago. He wrote that his factory was one of the leading producers of American-made toys for children, and he even hires children to work there. Kids are the best employees for toy making. They have the most imaginative ideas for a new toy and the most creative ways to make it. They also have nimble fingers to put together small parts and clean hard to reach areas in the machines, Otto wrote. I did ask if it was legal for a company to hire children to work for them, but then he replied, "It was back in the early days. Don't worry, no one gets hurt. The machines are all fail-safe and I built them myself." I asked Otto another time when I could go and visit his beautiful beloved toy factory. But he wouldn't tell me on the location of said factory. I asked what he I asked why, and he simply wrote, "It's a surprise. You'll know on your special day. I'll take you there myself. Just be." Otto would usually be gone for days. At one time, it was nearly 2 weeks. Though I never saw him during those periods of time, Otto still wrote to me. I'd wake up every morning to a reply letter telling me how his kids loved the stories he told about me and how they couldn't wait to meet me. But I still had to wait for that very special day. I desperately wanted to wait for that special day to come. I was so impatient to the point where I thought my heart was about to explode. Dad finally got the promotion he'd been striving for and confirmed that we will be moving very soon. He managed to find a small house in a smaller town in the countryside where he would pay cheap rent. Dad planned for us to move after school let out so I may graduate with my fellow peers. What school let out around mid-June. Dad and I did pretty well. So well that I managed to make it onto the honor roll and was recognized for it at graduation. My efforts were rewarded when my father had unlocked his closet and returned all of my toys to me. I was especially happy because it meant that I could take them to meet my imaginary friend again. Now let's see. Oh, there you go. So it looks like Butter Bunny. So let's see. I reintroduced Otto to Bo the bunny again. I explained to Otto how Bo was my favorite toy and how I had him all my life. Otto was so happy to see him again. The old giant bear looked at me with so much joy, and he hugged me and Bo close, like how my father usually would. I finally accomplished my goals, and I was happy. Like Dad, Otto was proud of me too, and informed me that the special day I would meet his family was drawing ever closer. And I asked when because we were in the middle of packing up, but he only answered with the same sentence as always. "It's a surprise." I grew more and more eager as for this special day to come, my childish mind unable to comprehend exactly how much danger I was actually in, until we finally moved. Chapter 8: New Friends. Dad packed everything into a small U-Haul truck, and we drove 4 hours to a small town in California's countryside. Not too isolated from the outside world, but far enough away where you can enjoy peace and quiet. A town where everybody knew everybody, and crime was surprisingly minimal. Our new home was an old wooden two-story coop at the edge of town. Our backyard was a giant field leading into a vast, dense forest beyond. Surprisingly, within the first few days we moved in, I managed to gain quite a number of friends my age. One new friend I made in particular was named Maxwell, or Max for short. He was a brown-haired, green-eyed kid who shared the same passion for Digimon as I did. My favorite's Gobblebon. What's yours? He asked me the first day we met. G- Gomamon? I remember replying. No one asked me that before. Within the first day of meeting, Max introduced me to some of his friends, a sweet little girl named Stephanie. Sorry. Sweet little girl named Stephanie. She was your classic little girl with a token 90s flair about her. She wasn't afraid to roughhouse with the boys every once in a while, but of course she preferred tea time with her dolls any day. She actually invited me to a tea party when we met. She loved the book Alice in Wonderland. Would you like some more sugar, March Hare? She asked me with the biggest, sweetest smile I could ever see on a little girl. Surrounded by her baby dolls and teddy bears, holding up an empty, bright pink teapot. Okay, I replied, wearing her silly brown rabbit ears on top of my head. I remember looking to Max, who was wearing a crude paper mache top hat that Stephanie made herself, laughably sulking the whole time. They in turn introduced me to a husky roughneck boy named Eddie, who moved in a year prior to me from Montana. I remember he was absolutely crazy about dinosaurs, absorbing every dinosaur fact and theory, the only subject he would devote his entire attention to. You could guess what his favorite movie was, though he did have a small interest in Digimon like me and Max. Yeah, it's okay, I guess. I love Greymon for sure. Do you like Jurassic Park? Did you see Lost World? That that scene with the T-Rex was the best. Dinosaurs are the best. When I grow up, I'm digging them up for my career, he announced proudly with his thick Montana accent. And finally a sickly smart kid with green braces, baby blue eyes, and thick square glasses called Daniel, who relished in the fact of being a genius with an IQ of 168, a fact proven by his teachers and doctors from the complex puzzles he completed at a very young age. Daniel loved robots and planned on building them one day. His hobbies included building plane and ship models, all of which were passions of his since he was little. Of course, he was a bookworm, with his favorite subjects being science and history, being an expert in both. He was What was kind of funny about him was that he couldn't stand it when you called him Danny. If you did, he'd simply reply plainly yet irritably, "It's Daniel." And with that, he'd press his glasses against his face the same way the kid in the Sandlot would, and return to in the same way the kid in the Sandlot would, and return to whatever nerdy stuff he was doing. I saw his bedroom once. It was shockingly neat for a fellow 7-year-old. A neatly made bed, a bookshelf full of kids' encyclopedias, maps of the U.S. and periodic table, and even a globe. Yes, a globe. It was the first thing I saw when I walked inside. After a while, I found myself helping him build an advanced model of the Enola Gay. Let's see. Dad would often invite my new friends and their families to our new house. We children would play in the backyard while he could get to know their parents. These four became my closest and bestest friends, coming over to my house almost every day and inviting me to go out exploring the neighborhood with them. After another few visits, Dad was comfortable enough to let me leave the neighborhood and explore the town, but no further. But on the first day I was given my privilege, I broke the rule. It took some convincing, but my friends were finally able to convince me to follow them half a mile beyond the old park at the edge of town, where I then learned of a small secret creek located just a mile west of town. A small, serene body of water bordered by trees and thick brush, seemingly isolated from the rest of civilization. They even showed me their giant oak tree next to the little creek, with a large hole embedded in the roots. That was where they hid their most prized toys and bags of well-kept Halloween candy and small 50-cent treats they snuck from local ma and pa stores. Though Daniel and Eddie still argued that it was too soon, it was unanimous that I would be initiated into their club. They had made me take an oath of secrecy for me not to tell any adult about this place. I had to keep our secret lair, as Daniel would call it, secret, even if I were to be tortured to death. As the creek was too deep in the forest and our parents would never allow us to go, especially my dad. What a That wetland was our playground where we would hang out and play with our most treasured toys. Stephanie had Susie, a big baby doll with beautiful curly brown hair and blue eyes like hers, wearing a bright pink dress and shiny black tap shoes. Eddie had his stuffed green and black striped T-Rex he named T. It had a button on its left hand that caused it to emulate the same iconic roar as the one in Jurassic Park. Daniel's favorite toy was a classic blocky silver robot he named Zolon, with a classic block head, lights, and everything. It looked almost antique. He claimed to have gotten it from his late grandpa. Maxwell's favorite toy was a 12-inch tall stuffed Gabumon plushie, a nearly perfect replica of the anime. It took a lot of courage, but I finally brought myself to introduce them to Bo, the bunny, sometime later. As expected, the boys made fun of me while Stephanie vouched for me and personally thought my toy was cuter than me. Every day, the five of us would meet at the park when no one was watching and sneak off to our hiding place, where we'd laugh and play and make up adventures. When the day was over, we'd sneak back into the house. Sneak back into town just before our curfews, and no one was the wiser. I'd tell Dad about our playtime, leaving certain details out, and he'd always express his happiness for me. He was glad I was adjusting so well. He was worried about the stress of the move and that I'd withdraw further into my fantasy, as he put it. As the new inv- as he, To my friends and parents when he first that he withdraw further into that I'd withdraw further into my fantasy, as he put it to my friends' parents when he first invited Max's fam Ma- when he was first in, when we were first invited to Max's family barbecue. During this time, I was adjusting to the new and the new and During this time, as I was adjusting to the new environment and my new friends, I never breathed a word about Otto, mostly out of fear of causing a fight over whether he was real or not, but also because I couldn't bring myself to trust Otto enough to introduce them. I didn't know how he would react to me having new friends. I didn't want him to think he was replaced. I was happy to have such a fun summer and finally make friends my age. But I was also very sad because I wasn't sure if my loyal bear could find me or not. I hadn't seen the slightest hint of him since Dad and I moved in. I was starting to lose hope. Until then, to my surprise, he did. When, what was even more surprising was when I saw him again, it was well into the afternoon. Weeks into my new establishment, I was playing with my army men while watching cartoons on Channel 40 when I noticed a large animal skulking around just beyond my backyard. It took me another moment to realize it was Otto skulking around my backyard, just at the forest lining, so he couldn't be seen, I assumed, by my neighbors. Otto seemed to have been trying to pose himself as a normal bear, sniffing around and digging at the roots of a nearby tree. My dad went to work for the day and left me with a babysitter who, lucky for me, was asleep at the time. Softly, I tiptoed my way downstairs and slipped out the back door. Once I was far enough from the porch, I bolted to the tree line and flew into his waiting paws. Otto actually seemed a little surprised to see me, but nonetheless, he hugged me so tightly that I thought my head would rocket off my shoulders. Before actually doing so, the jolly old bear released me from his grip. "Hey, Otto!" I yelled ecstatically. "I didn't think you'd find me." Otto nodded and reached into his denim pocket and handed me a note. I still remember how my hut fluttered with joy as I read it. "I never lost you." I looked to Otto, who just kept smiling, his signature closed smile. We celebrated in the backyard for about an hour or so before I suggested I go back inside, mentioning the babysitter. "I need to get back inside before she notices," I informed. Otto gladly let me leave. I slipped into the house as cleverly as I left and tiptoed back up to my room. It wasn't much longer before I took a nap myself. Playing with Otto was more tiring than I expected. The sun had long set by the time that my babysitter woke up from her nap and made dinner and woke me. We were all into our seconds when we were well into our seconds when Dad came home. "Hey kids, how was your day?" Dad asked proudly. The sitter pleasantly giggled as I excitedly replied, "Awesome!" Dad chuckled back as he grabbed a plate from the cupboard. After dinner, the sitter said her goodbyes with the usual plan to come again the following week. Dad let me play for another few hours before telling me to go to bed. I woke in the middle of the night to a pebble flying off my window. With an instinctive smile, I threw my dirty clothes on and jumped through the window into Otto's waiting arms below. We played in the backyard for a bit before proceeding onto the forest beyond. At first, we were playing hide and seek. I couldn't stop laughing when Otto would comically hide behind the thinnest trees and smallest rocks he could find. However, halfway through the game, he started to actually challenge me, finding bigger and better places, though some a touch dangerous, some right under my nose. Eventually, I gave up and chanted, "Ollie, ollie, oxen free." It seemed to take him a minute longer for him to come out. Then, when the clever bear finally did reveal himself, it turned out he was hiding inside a giant hollow cave deep in the mountainside. Behind me that entire time. I didn't even know there were cave systems that deep into the forest. It was then I figured it was time to get back into the side of town. I told Otto I was growing bored and suggested that we play tag instead. But I grew tired and struggled to keep up. I forgot how fast Otto could actually be at times, how far he could go, and on a few occasions I had to remind him that I couldn't wander too far from the town again or we'd get lost. I remember how Otto looked at me each time. At first it was disappointment, then frustration, then a sigh of defeat. After a while, the two of us got bored with no idea what to play next. I tossed a few game ideas of what we played back in Placerville County, but Otto shook his head at all of them. "I want to play something new," he wrote. "Have any ideas?" At first I drew a blank until he wrote again. Anything, a game, a place to explore. That's when another childishly idiotic idea dawned upon me and prompted me to make the second stupid mistake of my life. I broke my oath to my new friends and introduced Otto to the hiding place they showed me. The old bear was captivated by the beauty. The serene location, calm waters, and subtle silence of the peaceful surrounding nature absolutely blew him away. Taking a deep inhale through his nostrils, Otto opened his arms wide and embraced me with yet another tight hug, pulling me off the ground, legs swaying like noodles in the air. I giggled as the old bear squeezed me tight. He was so excited at the sight, and we proceeded to swim and play a new game of our invention. We called it Swamp Monster, and we played it nearly the rest of the night. It was kind of like hide and seek, only the one who was it would hide in the water, hold their breath for as long as they can, while the other player or players lingered around the bank or swam in the shallow waters. The it person would jump out and try to tag the other players. To get away, the players can run up the bank and tag the trees, which was the safe zone. The water was too cold for me that night, so Otto volunteered to be the swamp monster until another time. It was amazing just how scary Otto could be. He was amazingly talented at his part, popping out of the water almost when I'd least expect it every time. He lunged at me like a scary monster portrayed in the black and white movies. We topped the night by resting below the old oak and watched the sun rise above the treetops. Obviously not as well as a tall skyscraper, But we could but we could still watch the morning twilight gradually morph into the pale baby blue sky before us. I looked to the jolly old bear and decided to ask him when I would finally get my special day. Otto smirked as usual and plucked his notepad and ink bottle from his denim pocket and scribbled something down and handed it to me. When's your birthday? I was puzzled by this remark, but still I answered, August 6th. He then took the notepad back and wrote something else onto the paper, handing it back to me when he was done. That's your initiation day. I raised a brow. Initiation day? What the hell is that? I looked to Otto, who already knew my next question. He took the notepad and once again wrote another phrase onto it. You're going to be part of a special club in my toy factory. I'm the leader of this club, and I'm the leader of this of this club, of course. And my kids are members. Excuse me. And my kids are members. We invite special kids to my factory when they get initiated as a member. After some training, they can help with our toy making franchise. Oh, so I get to join on my birthday. I get to join on my birthday? I asked. That's what you meant by my special day? The bear nodded gleefully, placing his paws at either side of his body when one of them slipped into the hole between the tree roots. Otto snapped his attention from me to the hole when he pulled something out of it. It was Max's Gabumon plushie, partially dirty by Otto's wet clawed paw. That's Max's toy, I announced stupidly. Before I knew it, I found myself frozen upon Otto's gaze. He looked at me, surprisingly confused. Otto looked at the toy again, then back to me in a gesture asking if I knew him. I had no choice but to explain. Max is my new friend. Otto continued to gaze at me with a bewildered expression, a single ear perked up in a clueless manner, expecting to know more. With as much courage as I could muster, I explained further. I made some new friends while you were away. With that, the bear's sockets widened. Both his ears and eyebrows perked up in surprise. Otto looked to the toy again, then to the hole where he found the other toys. T, Zolon, and Susie inside with the giant bag of candy stuffed candy down beneath the protective tendrils of the tree. He sniffed the Gabumon plushie, then the rest of the toys before looking back to me with a blank expression. I half expected him to feel betrayed and chase me across the forest as if I was wearing a jacket made of meat. But amazingly enough, he didn't. In fact, he smiled, eagerly thumping his lumber tail on the wet soil. He was happy for me. You're not mad? I was in complete shock. The delighted bear shook his head merrily. Well, then, would you like to meet them? He nodded. Okay, I'll introduce you to them today if you want. We're probably going to meet here anyway. You can wait here. And Otto raised his giant paws in front of me, still holding the Gabumon, and rocked them side to side in a no fashion. Why not? I asked. With that question, Otto put Gabumon back, and took his notepad and once again scribbled something into it before handing it back to me. I'll meet them soon enough. In fact, they can come to the party and become members too. When are their birthdays? I don't know. I haven't known them that long yet. I never thought to ask, I reluctantly answered. Otto's ears drooped and his head and shoulders sunk nearly halfway down his torso, slouching in an overly exaggerated display of defeat. I too was disappointed about not learning an important aspect of my friends, yet equally amazed with Otto. It was so impressive just how animated the stuffed bear can be. As quickly as disappointment manifested, it dissipated. Otto suddenly perked up. The bear's eye sockets widened. His trademark closed smile returned to his face in a flash. He pointed uh, a single claw shoulder high. He had an idea. I half expected a bright yellow light bulb to pop up above his head, as I surely heard the sound effect in my mind. As quickly as he expressed his thought, Otto plucked the notepad from my hands yet again. The eager bear, the eager character scribbled swiftly and carefully before handing the notepad back to me. Can you get them for me? I absent-mindedly shrugged my shoulders. Okay, but why their birthdays? Otto wrote back. I like to initiate new members on their birthdays, and I like to throw birthday parties. It's more fun that way. Oh, okay. But I still don't get it. I began, my question still left unanswered. Why do you want to meet them so badly, but not right away? I need time to prepare. Besides, birthdays are more awesome with a great big party. I need to gather enough materials for all of you, but it might take a while. It all started to make sense to me. Yeah, birthday parties do take a long time to plan. I wouldn't be surprised if my father was already planning for me. But even if he planned for months, Dad could never afford anything too extravagant. But still, the sudden surprise of how well this bear was handling the situation still perplexed me. I'll admit, Otto, I confessed, it's weird how well you're taking all of this. Otto raised a brow. I thought you'd be mad. Otto paused, then shook his head. We looked at each other for what seemed like hours after that, expecting the other to respond. Otto remained hesitant for a second. Excuse me. Otto remained hesitant for a second, almost as if he was contemplating exactly what to say to me. After some thought, Otto took the notepad one last time and wrote something. He handed it back to me. I just want my best friend to be happy, to have all the friends in the world, and most of all, for me to be there, to watch you grow up as long as you allow me, if you want me to. I couldn't help but smile at what I read. I relished in the image Otto painted for me. To finally stand on my own 2 feet with a bunch of friends standing at either side of me, including my closest, Otto the bear, through thick and thin. It was like something out of a classic anime today. I longed for this dream to become a reality. My wish was willing to meet me halfway as I felt my eyes grow heavy and my limbs be turned into rubber. The loving fatherly bear lifted me up off my feet and placed me on his back, taking me home before Dad could realize I was gone. I had to wake up for just a few minutes longer just to change out of my clothes before collapsing in bed. I was barely able to pull the covers over me as my conscience relinquished its power to dreamland. Otto's turn. Chapter 9, Nightmares. I normally don't recall any of my dreams as a child, which was what made this one stick out in my mind so well, even today. Like every dream, some unusual things happened, but this time it was eerie. It started off with me playing somewhere fun. I didn't know where and it didn't matter, only that it was for kids. A Disney-type wonderland combined with Chuck E. Cheese arcades, giant carnival rides. Kids were jumping and playing while screaming at the top of their lungs with joy. Friendly clowns were giving out candy and lollipops with big smiles like they loved what they were doing. And my parents were there. Mom and Dad were holding my hand with that combination of love and protection, never wanting me to let go. Mom and Dad couldn't stop telling me how much they loved me. It was like they were still married. Like what happened this last year never occurred at all. But then I heard the sound of a bear. It wasn't scary, just the grunt of an average sounding bear. I I let go of my parents' hands and turned around to see if somebody brought a live bear in uniform or something to perform for the children. But all I saw was a stuffed yellow ribbon were but all I saw were stuffed yellow ribboned teddy bears of various sizes decorated around every carnival ride, every food court, every corner of the park. The bears were stacked one on top of the other, everywhere. They were the only prizes you could win. There were no other stuffed animals to be seen, only bears. There were even dozens hanging from a grand, ancient, long dead black tree resting in the middle of the grounds, hollowed out at the base, and housing what were more demented teddy bears. Something was off about the bears. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, until I paid more attention to how they were constructed. They were all amazingly detailed, too detailed. Their fur appeared too realistic, like they were once alive before someone hunted them down and stuffed them for sale. The ends of their paws sported the classic claws you see on living bears, hooked and razor sharp. They looked so convincing, I thought they were going to come to life at any moment and smother me to death with their fuzzy frames. I remained still as the clan of stuffed animals observed me with their sunken black eyes, appearing to more and more malnourished as the environment changed. Their eyes seemed to warn and even pity me, like they knew of a coming danger I couldn't see. I turned to my parents. I turned to my parents to point out my eerie find when I realized they vanished. It was so subtle that I didn't notice until it was too late. They couldn't have left me, and I know I didn't wander off. That's when I realized they weren't the only ones gone. The park, once brimming with children, color, and happiness, now laid abandoned and gray. Rides broken, food stands empty, grounds littered with food and debris discarded for years. I was the only one in the park, just me and the bears. The bears. I wheeled around and to find the bears were no longer in their proper places. They gathered around me in a 10-foot high wall just a few feet away from me, blocking every possible path I could consider using as an exit. Their eyes were removed, their ribbons tattered and dirty, no longer yellow but red, their bodies cut up and stitched together in grotesque forms. I was too afraid to approach them. There was only one way to escape, and that was a spot I didn't even know was behind me. Where my parents once stood was now a great big yellow and red tent decorated with dirt and neglect, with a great big dark opening. But even that wasn't an option as I heard a bellow of a massive animal echo from the inside the blackness. The last thing I remember was a pair of giant red eyes. It was then I woke up from to a familiar voice. Dad didn't fi- Dad didn't finally wake me up until just after noon. I had an unusual paranoid sensation in the pit of my stomach for most of the day. After brunch, Dad had me do some household chores like clean my room, wash dishes, sweep the porch, help with laundry. Only then did he let me go out and meet with my friends. By the time I finished, I had finally forgotten the dream for the time being. My feelings of paranoia were replaced by the longing to play with my friends. Once I was ready, I darted out the front door, gripping Bo by the ear, and didn't stop running until I reached our haven. When I arrived, Max, Stephanie, Eddie, and Daniel surrounded the old oak. I stopped when I saw them, confused and confused and upset at whatever they were seeing. Dropping bow, I slowly approached the disjointed circle. Hey guys, what's wrong? Daniel turned around. Remnants of dried tears coated his cheeks. He dried the leftovers when he realized I noticed. The sanctity of our lair has been violated, he answered with a capsized cadence. I understood what he meant, but still couldn't properly process the situation. So I asked the predictable question. What do you mean? Somebody stole our toys, Stephanie simplified as she stared down into the now empty hole in the ground. Newly exposed roots were broken and freshly introduced into the air. Fresh clumps of dirt mounded around the hole, appearing to have been dug up very recently. The toys and giant bag of tightly wrapped candy was gone. Obviously, I knew exactly who was responsible, yet I remained in dumbfounded denial. I couldn't say anything. Not yet. Otto told me he wanted us to surprise them. He had to have taken them for a good reason. I knew I couldn't say anything, not wanting to spoil his surprise. Nervously, I tugged at my shirt. My friends instinctively knew I must have had something to do with it, because they looked to me with suspicious eyes. Eddie didn't bother hesitating. Did you tell someone about our creek? He barked accusingly. No, I answered quickly. Perhaps too quickly. Oh, come on, Eddie snapped. You're the newest kid here. I didn't tell anyone anything, I swear, I pleaded. Eddie, I don't think Luke would tell his dad. Why would he? Stephanie stated. Daniel stepped in with one of his hypotheses. Well, Eddie is right. Luke is the newest kid here. He addressed Stephanie before turning to me. And honestly, you are a bit of a goody two-shoes. What does that have to do with any of this? Max intervened, more confused than me. What I mean is, not very many kids here are, not even me. Everyone here has his or her own secrets, no matter what age. Daniel turns back to me. Your dad seems to have you pretty well structured because he has you report home an hour before sunset, whereas our parents let us stay out until 9 p.m., no matter what daylight savings it is. If he wanted to, he could make you tell him anything. His demeanor makes us all a little scared of him. Even Eddie shakes a little when he is caught by him. I looked to the others. Max and Stephanie nodded. Eddie did so, but more reluctantly, trying to keep his tough guy reputation. Daniel continued. For all we know, your dad was the one who took our toys. I bet he's waiting for us back at home with our parents, our toys in hand, waiting to lecture our ears off and ground us. Furthermore, I noticed you have a tell when you're lying to someone. What are you talking about? I asked, pulling my shirt. You just did it. Did what? I'm not doing anything. Subconsciously, I pulled at my shirt again. What you just did now. Well, when we first noticed you tug at your when we first met, I noticed you tug at your shirt when you're nervous, Daniel stated, pointing at my left hand, clenched at the side of my shirt. In conclusion, you are the primary suspect. Really sure you're not letting that inflated ego of yours get to your head again? Stephanie argued skeptically. If that was really the case, wouldn't it have made more sense for our parents to have hid here? If they were trying to trick us into thinking someone stole our toys, they'd eventually come out of hiding once Luke got here. Or his dad would have followed him, or even make Luke take him here. But it is still possible they could be waiting at one of our houses, tricking us into thinking it was someone else until we come home and they can corner us so we can't talk our way out of it, Daniel stated further. They could be expecting us to rush back home and tell the boys were taken. Both Stephanie and Daniel's arguments proved plausible, but Max pointed out the one thing they didn't take into account. But if that were the case, either way, our parents would drop a hint that we were evil. Everyone looked to Max as he explained. Parents aren't as subtle as they like to think they are. Usually if we're in trouble, they kind of inform us in advance. Mom usually talks in an exaggerated tone when I'm busted. What about you guys? Don't your parents do something similar? We all found ourselves nodding to each other. Mom and Dad always gave me this look, but Mom usually follows hers with yelling, Stephanie confessed, her guilt-filled gaze locked onto the grass at our feet. My dad takes out his belt, and he and Mom take a turn. I'd be limping here with red marks all over my ass, Eddie uttered shamefully. I can tell what's coming by how they carry themselves. My parents always tell me to follow them into the kitchen, Daniel described, more annoyed than scared. Luke, Max turned to me as the others waited for my answer. Dad probably would have done what Stephanie described. Either follow me or make me take him to us. But trust me, it'll probably end with a beating similar to Eddie's before I'd reach the door. I elucidated honestly. Then who else would have known about this place? Eddie jumped in. Is there anyone else you could have told? He demanded to me. I had the obvious answer, but I couldn't risk telling them about my friend. They think I was making him up. And on the off chance they did believe me, it still wouldn't excuse why Otto took their toys. I knew Otto wouldn't hurt their toys. He was keeping them safe. He was probably preparing them for their birthdays. But I tried to rationalize my fears, though, through naively imagining everyone on their birthday. My bear with Susie, T, Zolon, and Gabumon dressed up in cute little paper hats, sitting in their personal collapsible chairs beside their owners' reserved ones in a birthday-themed room in Otto's toy factory. His kids anxiously waiting cheerfully for the four of them to arrive. There was nothing I could say to them without giving anything and everything away. So I said nothing. Eddie grew angry at my response, or lack thereof. He stomped forward dominantly. He was about to physically hurt me. Like he was about to physically hurt me. Before he could try, Stephanie stepped between us. Look, guys, we may not know Luke all that well, but he would never tell his dad or anyone else. Why would he? He would never betray our friendship like that. Not after we just met. Especially not after we just met. Stephanie stood beside me, arms folded over her chest. And certainly not with what happened to him back at his old school. What are you talking about? Max asked. I never had any real friends. I only had bullies. Just a second. I affirmed dishonorably. This time my gaze was lowered to the ground. From there, I confessed the other sad things that happened to me during the year. Stephanie was the only one I told, which is how she knew. I watched as everyone's suspicious ogling was replaced by sympathy and guilt. They did feel bad for me, but they did not yield their apprehension. See? Stephanie pointed out confidently. Why would he tell? He is sweet and loyal. The boys looked to each other in doubt, but their skepticism remained unanimously strong. Unanimously strong. Sorry about that. I couldn't read that for a second. Unanimously wrong. Strong. That is pretty good argument. Daniel tapped his chin. But you're still a suspect. Oh, whatever. Stephanie turned to me. Don't listen to him. He just likes to show off. She didn't have to tell me. I've only been in that town a few weeks, and even I knew that. Besides, how do we know it wasn't those mean teenagers? I was confused, Stephanie affirmed. I was confused. Huh? There are 3 teenagers who like to cause trouble in the neighborhood. We were told to never interact with them because they are dangerous. We were also told to never come out here because they liked roaming the forest to do bad things. Stephanie explained to me further, addressing everyone else. Explained to me before addressing everyone else. For all we know, it was them. Maybe they found this place by accident and took our things. That's true. Once again, Daniel found himself lost in the confines of his thoughts, dissecting every conceivable equation. I could give Daniel credit at least trying to be open-minded about the situation, but Eddie wasn't at all convinced. In fact, Eddie remained suspiciously quiet until then. Come on, Dan. You know it was him. He's the new kid. Eddie growled passionately. This time, his accusation seemed more personal than before. That still doesn't prove anything. I mean, why would Luke steal Stephanie's doll? Max provided another idea to add to the flurry of questions already asked. Why does he have a pussy little bunny rabbit for a favorite toy? Eddie pointed at my stuffed animal resting on the grass, just like a judge upon the accused. My body ignited with rage. Don't talk about Bo like that! Or what, tattletale? Eddie charged, stomping his feet and balling his fists like a prehistoric beast. We were nose to nose, his face radiating red. The others always told me he had a temper, but I didn't think it'd be this bad. I was starting to wonder if he was a bully himself at his old school. Stephanie stepped between us. Stop it! Eddie barely acknowledged her futile effort to push him back, having a look on his face like what she was doing was encouraging him instead of the opposite. He looked like he was going to try and punch me, and he would have gladly done so if Max hadn't come in to help Stephanie. All right, Eddie, stop it! Max looked to me and asked the question once more. Luke, did you tell anyone about this place or not? No, I declared, mirroring Eddie's demeanor as I stomped my foot. Okay, then someone else did, Max began calmly. Let's just tell our parents about our secret lair, Eddie furiously interrupted. That someone else stole our toys. We don't have to bring up our creek. God, stop interrupting, Eddie. You're such an ass. Daniel, Stephanie, and I were speechless at how bold Max was being. Saying a word like that would have definitely gotten him spanked if Eddie told his parents. However, Eddie had a bit of a habit of saying it all the time, so Max had more weight over him than he did. So Max had more weight over Eddie than he did. Seriously, Eddie, why do you have to be such a baby about this? Stephanie accused, still acting as a barrier between him and I. Because he likes you, Daniel replied for Eddie. Isn't that obvious? Daniel adjusted his glasses sarcastically as he stated this fact. Eddie's face ignited into embarrassment and frustration. He still didn't answer the question himself. He just moved Stephanie aside and aggressively before knocking me down, turned around and stormed off into the wilderness. Fuck this! I'm going to find tea! Our jaws dropped when we heard Eddie say the forbidden F word. It cut through our ears like a frostbitten sword as we froze in place to let the shock sink in. Eddie must have been truly upset to risk such an ass kicking from his parents if they ever found out. Once the paralysis conceded, we began to feel bad about what happened. We tried calling him back, but he refused to answer, and we didn't bother to follow. We decided to let Eddie throw his tantrum and talk to him later when he felt better. Until then, we had to focus on how we're gonna tell our parents about our toys being taken without including our secret hiding place. We rehearsed our story over and over again for hours until we got it down. We would tell them that we were playing hot and playing in the park nearby when some local troubled teens, Fred, Ben, and Alan, stole their toys. These have been in trouble for everything, and I mean everything, from vandalism to stealing cars and doing every drug invented, and even stealing candy from unsuspecting trick-or-treaters on Halloween. After hearing of them, I began to think of the three meth heads back in my old town, and how these kids were unknowingly very well on their way to a similar fate. A good and smart reason to steer clear of drug use no matter what. Pinning it on them would be perfect, for all the others knew they were the ones who probably did it anyway. The story was going to be that Eddie, Daniel, Max, and Stephanie were playing by the slides at the park when the gruesome threesome jumped out of the tree line and threatened them with a knife, demanding them to hand over their toys. And if they didn't, the teens would hurt them. The only reason I still had Bo was because I happened to show up just after the incident occurred. The lie was a stretch, but with some aspects of truth inserted into it, it seemed more plausible, as Daniel put it. The four of us even taught ourselves to cry on command and to make the lie seem more convincing. The only flaw in our story was that Eddie wasn't aware, so we had to find him and inform him of our story as soon as possible. Assuming he didn't already go home and tell his parents something totally different, or the truth, Max warned Eddie can be quite a hypocrite when he wanted to be, and this would be a golden opportunity to get back at me for earlier. About an hour before my curfew, the four of us walked in town together. We also took the liberty to try and find Eddie on the way, but found no sign of him. We assumed he went home, and it was starting to get dark. Even though we pretty much had the story down, we rehearsed it a few more times during our stroll back to better ensure none of us would trail off the established plot. As my friends and I continued down the main street, we noticed something odd. Excuse me. The lights of the lamps in neighboring houses were of course on, but the streets themselves were deserted. Now that wasn't completely unusual at first due to how small the town was, but even this town had a nightlife of sorts. You would always see stores still open, a few groups of adults talking on a bench at a corner or at the corner, and even a car or two cruising down the street. The sidewalks that evening were completely empty, with only a few plastic bags dancing in the summer breeze. Another thing we noticed was the town's police department was empty, and every car in the parking lot was gone. As we continued through the town, we attempted to talk casually to distract ourselves. I knew this would be the perfect time to ask my question. So, when's your birthdays? I asked, chuckling uncomfortably. July 4th, Daniel answered, adjusting his glasses with pride. Mine's July 29th, Stephanie replied wholeheartedly. August 1st, Max replied instantly. Eddie's was today. We were invited. So were you, Luke. He continued to explain. Really? Yeah, Stephanie answered for Max. Daniel nodded. I was immediately overwhelmed by guilt. Don't worry, I patted my shoulder. I'm sure he found tea by now, and maybe even our toys. In fact, I bet he's probably at home right now, wolfing down a giant slice of birthday cake and playing with his new dinosaurs. He should have forgotten all about the incident. We proceeded further into town until we rounded the corner into Eddie's neighborhood. Through nothing else but unlucky timing, the four of us saw the exact opposite of what Max described. Before us was Eddie's house, crawling with small town deputies. The sight of green and black balloons decorating the front yard, outlining the white plastic tables with styrofoam plates of ice cream and green dinosaur-themed cake. Behind the house towered an inflated rooftop of a primary colored bounce house, waiting impatiently for kids to bounce their hearts out within. Eddie's parents were standing at the front door. Eddie's mom was crying, clinging to her spouse's shoulder as he told the police where they last saw their son. He trailed off when he saw us standing at the driveway. Eddie's dad pointed to us. "You four, come here," he ordered. Confused and scared, we reluctantly made our way up to the driveway, up the driveway to the porch to the waiting adults, our heads down. I was certain we must have been caught somehow. "Don't worry, kids, you're not in trouble," the chief explained. "We just need to ask you a couple of questions, but not here. We need your parents to be present." The cops took us to their department, where we waited patiently for our parents. When they arrived, they seemed worried but disappointed with us at the same time, especially my dad. Dad drilled into me with unrelenting eyes. It was like it was like when he caught me when I was doing something when I was little, doing something really bad. The chief explained the current situation to the parents, and thankfully Dad calmed down. Each of us had to be interviewed separately. They asked for each parent's presence during our questioning about Eddie's whereabouts. Eddie went missing sometime between our fight and our returning home. His parents called the cops when they realized Eddie was far too late for his party. Cops assumed that it had to have something to do with the woods lining the town and were worried that there may be a predator in the area. They guided my friends and I into separate rooms with our parents and asked us questions about what occurred earlier that day, and we told them what we rehearsed. As we hoped, the adults bought it, and we're hoping to look into the three teens, and we're going to look into the three teens while we could go home. Also, as expected, they brought in the teens who denied the accusations. They couldn't exactly establish their alibi without bringing up some illegal activities they did for the day, however. But since there was no evidence to hold them, the teens were given the benefit of the doubt. They still had to be charged for everything else they did, but they were confined to a jail cell for 24 hours where the three of them were released into their parents' custody the following morning. With doubt lingering, both parents and police agreed to keep a very close eye on them, given their reputation. Until then, police went back to their original theory that there might have been some pedophile passing through, picking up Eddie as a souvenir of their time spent. It was summer after all, so there would be some nearby towns with a high tourist population that time of year. And this was an era where stranger danger was all the rage. Eddie's parents, coupled with the police and townspeople, did everything possible to find him. They posted missing photos on milk cartons, newspapers, the internet, news reports, and even aired on TV all over California and even our neighboring states, hoping someone in a nearby city had spotted him or know what could have happened to him. Police searched and searched for days with no trace of our missing friend. It wasn't much longer until the townspeople gave up on looking for a live person and instead scanned the woods for, at the very least, a body to bury. Only to end with the same result: no trace, no hope, and hopefully for now, no reason to keep searching. Eddie had now officially become part of the mounting statistics ever rising in the U.S. To prevent this from happening again, police gave all the local kids a 5 p.m. curfew. On top of this, we were told to not play out in the woods. A rule the remaining four of us broke religiously. Eddie wouldn't have wanted us to abandon our favorite club area, so we kept going for him, to remember him. That was until the 4th of July, Daniel's birthday. Daniel, Max, Stephanie, and I tried to focus on playing in the creek with our second favorite toys. Max and I played together with my toy Bo and his Agumon plushie, pretended to be on a digital adventure. Stephanie sat under the tree, pretending to pet the stuffed orange kitten resting on her lap, petting the stuffed animal like it was real. Daniel had a blue race car. He sped around the mud, the whole time crashing the toy into the water puddles at the creek's edge, making huge splashes and sending water raining down on our toys. We played while keeping Eddie in our hearts, but tried our hardest to keep his fate out of our minds. However, we eventually ended up having a conversation about what might have happened to him anyway. Daniel, being the little nerd that he was, hypothesized that aliens abducted Eddie. He then proceeded to back up his theory with myths about Area 51, reports from surviving abductees, and the inexplicable lights in the sky occurring throughout the United States over the last few decades. He even made the point of how Eddie was taken with no trace of the perpetrator, a common staple in alien abduction. The rest of us, of course, thought he was just spouting a bunch of bullshit. We continued to play and until Stephanie stopped petting her kitten and looked to the forest behind her. Did you guys hear that? She asked distressingly. An ocean swell of fear lining the back of her voice. Instinctively, we all craned our heads in the direction Stephanie pointed out. It was then we started to hear unusual noises in the wilderness. It was subtle at first, simply twigs snapping and branches rustling from the distance. At first, the four of us chalked it up as nothing until we felt the strange feeling of eyes observing us from beyond the trees. Through them, though we didn't say anything to one another, the three of us agreed that we were being watched. The four of us agreed we were being watched. We continued in a futile attempt to scoff off our paranoia and rationalize it as a deer or leftover heebie-jeebies from what happened with Eddie. But after a while, we just couldn't shake it. We found ourselves checking our environment every time we heard a leaf land on the ground or a hot gust of wind tickle the trees. Other than that, the forest was quiet. Too quiet. It was then Daniel ironically decided to be logic about our situation and assumed there had to have been a valid explanation. Like perhaps it was just another kid playing with illegal fireworks in the forest so they wouldn't get caught. Everyone accepted Daniel's idea and tried to take his word for it, as it made the most sense. But there was something wrong with it. Where were the explosions? As the situation continued, and after I swear the sounds got a little close. As the situation continued, I swear the sounds got a little closer. It was then Daniel jumped up and marched into the woods to investigate, despite our saying not to. Eventually, we gave up calling and tried once more to get back to playing. We assumed Daniel would come back anytime. He never came back. The three of us didn't really pay attention for a while, until Stephanie claimed she heard something moving beyond the trees again. Again, we saw nothing, but continued to hear the crunching sticks and moving branches. However, along with this came something else, something more primal. From beyond the tree line, it sounded like something groaning as it worked its way through the dense forest. Like it was something really big and heavy was gradually maneuvering its way towards us, all while trying its damned hardest not to notice. But we did. It didn't take us much longer before we realized it knew where we were here. Stephanie started to whimper. Max and I were rattled too, but we tried to remain strong for her. If anything, the two of us had to make sure Stephanie was all right. She was the only one who could find help if something bad happened. Don't worry, Stephanie, Max began, futilely attempting to sound strong. It's probably just Daniel messing with us again. You know how he is, always scaring us when given the chance. Remember last Halloween when he told us monsters weren't real before ditching us and popping out of a trash can in his werewolf costume like 10 minutes later with that fake blood dripping down from his mask? Max turned to me. We knew it was him because we knew it was him. It was him that night because he was still wearing his stupid glasses over it. He's blind as a bat without them. Stephanie nodded, trying to agree, but still she couldn't bring herself to calm down. We stayed a little longer, trying to eke it out until curfew. But that idea grew to be less and less of a good one as the sounds grew ever closer. Like whoever or whatever it is had to have been well aware of the curfew as the sounds grew more and more impatient with the setting sun. Drawing ever closer and ever louder, Stephanie was shaking like a leaf. Max finally grew tired of it and shouted into the wilderness, Dan, come on, quit playing around. You're scaring Stephanie. The only response we got was the continued sounds of crunching foliage. A lump sprouted like a planted seed in my throat as a cold shiver slithered up my spine. Stop it, Daniel, Stephanie shouted, clutching her stuffed kitten to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. You're not funny. Again, there was no reply. We still couldn't see anything but trees. It was then we realized that whatever it was too bestial for any 8-year-old child to make. But the three of us wanted to be certain it was Daniel fucking with us. I finally had enough and shouted, Daniel! This time there was a reply, but not the one we were expecting. Instead of Daniel's voice, we heard an aggressive grunt of a large, powerful predator coming straight for us. We didn't stick around to meet the source of that grunt. The three of us grabbed our toys and darted through the woods in the opposite direction, running as fast as our legs could carry us, trampling through the thick foliage out of the trees into the park. Out of breath, we stopped next to the wooden jungle gym to observe our surroundings. The swings swayed sadistically against the late afternoon light. The merry-go-round rotated deliberately as it let out a rusted metallic shrill. Thinking we were close enough to civilization, where we remained where we were for several minutes, watching the forest and catching our breath. We nearly let our guards down completely when a second blood-curdled cry reverberated from the trees, not far from the tree line, followed by relentless gasping and heavy pads of feet stomping the dirt beneath. Stephanie dropped her stuffed kitten as we took off again. She faltered only for a second to see if she could try and retrieve her toy, but I grabbed her wrist and pulled her to my side as we ran. We kept going until we reached town and went straight into the police station. Needless to say, our secret hideout was inevitably exposed. All three of us fell into a lot of trouble. Max and Stephanie were forcefully taken home by their parents for whatever punishment they saw fit. Meanwhile, Dad spanked me from the top of my head to the tips of my toes before grounding me for 2 weeks after that. He planned to watch me like a hawk for the rest of the summer after my punishment was lifted. Police scoured the creek for Daniel, only to find his blue toy car and later his cracked glasses which rested in the brush about half a mile from the creek. Like with Eddie, there was no trace of Daniel. Also, like with Eddie, authorities went through all the standard procedures to find him, searching for days, but nothing, not even a suspect. They tried drilling the 3 teens again. Nothing. No proof they were behind it. No proof they were even in the area where Daniel was taken, because this time they had a crime-free alibi. Mandatory community service for picking up trash off the highway all day. They had their probation officers and co-volunteers to confirm it. They couldn't skip it if they wanted to anyway. because they were on their last strike. All right. Okay. That was Otto's Toy Factory, chapters 6 through. Oh, wait, is that 6 through 9? Oh, yeah, I think it was 7 through 9. Yep. 7 through 9. Okay, so that will conclude the live stream for this morning. And let's see, so next will be chapters 10 through 12. All right, so I will be doing that Wednesday morning. All right, so thanks for participating, watching this live stream. See you guys Wednesday morning. All right. Have a good day. Oh, and I will be including link in the description, of course, for the so you can read the story yourself. All right. Have a good day.